It's after midnight on a Friday.
So Saturday.
Probably 80 degrees. I ain't go outside, but I finished my dissertation proposal draft.
It's literally. It's literally.
It's lit.
Z. Peace, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Literally Z. I'm your host, Z, literally. And I'm not even going to pretend like I'm recording on some different day. It's the same day. So if you just listened to or watched episode 4, it's the same day for me. And episode 5. If you just listened to episode 5, we're now on episode 6. 6. Okay, come on. Episode 6. Half a dozen. Real quick, we interrupt this for an important message. This is actually episode 7, and 7 is my favorite number, so we must pause here and be very intentional about saying this is episode 7. 7 is a number of completion, although we are not done. It is nice to be at 7, and so I'm happy to be at 7. 7, 7, 7, 7. Not 6, but 7, because I was overwhelmed, and I had to push this one back. Okay, this is now episode 7. Thank you very much. All right, let's get back to it. All right, now, if you're watching these in order, that means that you've already done the episode on supermarket redlining, food apartheid. But don't fret, I can give you a little recap, okay? And if you've already seen it, I promise it's going to be a very brief recap, I promise. So that episode really followed my journey down the rabbit hole after a very anti-Black grocery shopping experience that occurred after a fairly pleasant one in a gentrified area. So again, the gentrified area happened, and then the anti-Black one happened. And that rabbit hole took me to grocery store policies on the whole. I talked about food deserts, food mirages, food swamps, food apartheid, supermarket redlining. Also, redlining was also in there, redlining generally speaking as well. And finally, tried to end on a little bit more of a positive note with food sovereignty. Okay. And from more on all of that, please go back and check out episode 5 if you've not already. Okay. Now, if you're still with me, great. Now we're going to get into environmental racism. I was itching to talk about this when we had the Inglewood example, but I held my tongue. And also, I want to note that a lot of what I'll be presenting here in this podcast is stuff that I did teach in a lecture. It's a graduate level lecture for master's students and doctoral students. So y'all getting a free class, and class is expensive too. Y'all getting a free class. Like that's, I'm putting something. I'm kidding. I'm gonna say I'm putting something in y'all pocket. I'm not, and I can't. But nevertheless, I do want to also bring a lot more of my lectures from that course to the podcast as well. So this is just one example of it. I really want to start from like lecture numero uno. This is from actually week 8 of the course. So y'all jumping ahead a lot, but I'm gonna catch you up. Don't worry. So getting back to that Inglewood example, though, I'm gonna have a whole lot of stuff coming up on the screen. So we first have this graphic, which is talking about Inglewood as a neighborhood. It shows you where it is in Chicago, south side of Chicago. It tells you who lives there, 95% Black, okay? 55% female, 45% male. The population is 26,000. It goes into the age demographics as well. So this is this page. Second page, social determinants of health, okay? Those include the social, economic, and physical conditions in which people are born, live, and work that affect their health and well-being. For example, where you live can limit access to healthy foods. This in turn increases one's risk for obesity and other chronic conditions related to diet. So they have economic factors here. The median household income is $22,000. The median household income for Chicago on the whole is double. Basically, it's $53,000. Okay. They also have the education, and majority of folks have that high school or high school equivalent. But most folks, are not, I would say not necessarily doing more than that, because if 36% is high school equivalent, 25% is less than high school, then that's already the majority right there. Okay. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. That is what they're saying is then connecting to some of this unemployment. So we have unemployment here is 35% for Inglewood versus 8% for Chicago. Also, the poverty line. So 45% of Inglewood is in poverty versus only 19% of Chicago. So majority, you see, the numbers, all right? 56% of households spend 30% or more of their annual income on housing costs. Look, I'm pausing in here to add a little bit more context to the housing cost aspect, because I don't believe that I went through it in the actual episode. And again, like, there's so many conversations that one can have about housing security as well. Environmental racism was the technical topic, so I didn't get too much into other elements of housing insecurity. But So sorry, excuse me, y'all. But for example, in other cities where there's a lot of vacancies, like folks be like, oh, why can't people just, move into these houses? But there'll be issues like lead, that runs through the pipes, if different issues with molding and insulation. I bring up insulation because when homes are not properly insulated, you end up kind of wasting money on energy because the house is like leaching cold air during the summer. It's leaching the warm air you're trying to pump out during the winter. And therefore, it just feels you can never get it cold enough in the summer. You can never get it warm enough in the winter because so much of that energy that you're using to try to cool your house, to try to heat your house, is actually going back out into the environment. And that is honestly in some ways an intentional practice, like things are rushed up. I literally went to a session not too long ago where these developers try to come in and incentivize folks to buy into this it's technically a federal program, but at the state level, to then get a loan. Like, we can get I'm not a financial advisor, but to get this sum of money, and you agree then to restore one of the houses that is currently vacant. But the amount of money they give you, there are other people in the room, and these are people in the room who are trying to do very environmentally, socially, ethically conscious homes. And in that sense, they understand that it is the cities, the states, poorest folks who spend the most. So again, with this example, how, so much of the people in Inglewood are spending a good chunk, like a third or more of their income is going to housing costs. That's not feeding the family. That's not getting them to and from where they gotta go. No emergencies, no hospital visits. A whole third of what they're getting in the income is just going to trying to maintain their housing, and that's why. So these folks are trying to do it a different way. They need a lot more money to do it. And now with these tariffs on Canada, where we get our lumber, Jesus, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, with all these extra tariffs, it's going to be even more expensive. But the idea of their homes, I just want to shout out this developing strategy, if you will, is to number one, wipe gut the pipes. That's number one because of the lead. Two, also, gutting the walls and getting it down to basically the studs of the house, right? Just the little frames of it. Okay. And in some cases that might also need to be replaced because the wood has been, chewed into by termites, things like that. So getting the foundation real good and set, and then insulation, spending a good chunk of time and effort into really properly insulating the home, which will then again already decrease the cost of energy for the home already. That's off top. And then two, they also have this idea of putting solar panels on the roofs of these homes. And in that way, that home is able to produce its own energy, so basically a zero energy home, but get this, the amount of solar energy they would be able to generate, because also a lot of these homes that are vacant are in areas that have already been redlined and like segregated out to black folks. And in these areas, we find that areas in the city that have more so black people or minoritized populations, they're hotter, they're experiencing more of the effects of climate change. And so in that way, they're going to have a lot of sun to soak up. There's not as much tree canopy, things like that, so they have plenty of sun to soak up. And the amount of sun that they would take into their solar panels, they could then sell back out to other businesses and the city even, to then make money so they can profit off their homes. So like once they get into their home, number one, they're not paying an arm and a leg to keep the home, like to keep it cool, to keep it warm, all those different things. And then number two, they're also able to make money off of the home as well. So I just wanted to, as I was going through editing, I was like, hold on, I want to add a little bit more context to why that figure of spending a third of your income on housing cost is significant. I feel like I kind of passed over it, but that's a significant chunk of your money, which then does really limit what you can do with the rest of it. Now let's get back to it. Us, 1 in 2 children are living in poverty. 54% of households are receiving food stamps. 72% of households are at risk for food insecurity. And before we get into anybody try to run past here talking about some living off the government, number one, we pay taxes, so we should be supported. That's number one. And who is taxed the most? It ain't the rich, but the rich be getting all them tax cuts. They be getting all them tax incentives and credits. So they don't pay the government anything, but they get money from the government. And then those of us who are struggling day to day to pay rent and to put food in our own bodies and the bodies of our children don't deserve no services. Come on, like let's. So I'm not gonna go super down that, but I just, since I mentioned the word food stamp, and just in case, please don't come toward me. Don't even step near my doorstep talking that foolishness, because that's ridiculous. It's honestly ridiculous. Okay. And then physical factors. So we have 35% of the housing units are vacant. And what that typically means, this is not the only city that has that. Plenty of other cities have hella vacant homes. These homes are probably mold infested, probably also lead infested. So they're not really livable. Don't have insulation. So again, as temperatures fluctuate, climate change, again, not livable. Probably a lot of holes, and again, not insulated, but also probably has a lot of holes in the foundation and the roofs, things like that. Critters can come in and out. So there's different ways where these homes are probably have been probably foreclosed and abandoned. Okay. And so it doesn't fully help the housing crisis as far as folks who are without homes, because they're also not livable. And folks who come in to develop them for the rich and the white. They don't develop them for those who are living on the streets. Okay. And 51% of the adults report that they feel safe in their neighborhoods most all of the time. So a little more than half of them feel safe. And this is then, of course, they put that violent crime estimate right beside it. And they said 11,000 for Inglewood and 4,000 for Chicago. But again, I want to remind that 51% of the adults reported they feel safe in that neighborhood. So it points to who's feeling unsafe, and also the fact that with violent crime, specifically, there 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 can still be nuance with that. I'll just say that there can still be nuance with that, because I I appreciate they're not fully connecting the violent crime with the fact that this is black and folks who are basically at the poverty line or below it. But some folks do that in a deficit mindset. So I just want to be careful in saying that. And I want to not skip it on here and seem like I'm fake and I'm trying to paint everything like it's just rose colored, but also be mindful of the fact that, these are the only numbers that I'm seeing right now, right along with y'all. And so we're not going to make extra assumptions about things. Okay. Now, as we move on to access to care is very important. There's often a high cost of care. We really should have universal health care. It should not cost us to prolong our lives. It should not cost us the way it does. So 17% of the population are uninsured. About 83% report having a consistent source of primary care provider. 66% report that it is usually or always easy to get the care and tests that they need, treatments as well that they need. 44% of the pregnant women received early and adequate prenatal care. 70% report receiving colorectal cancer screenings. Health behaviors, about 26% reported not participating in any physical activity or exercise in the past month. So I don't know why they even put it as like a negative, because that means that how many people were doing it, 74%. So like, why you had to put it as a negative? Okay. Anyway, 36% report drinking soda or sweetened drinks every day. Again, so 64% said that they don't drink those every day. Like, I don't know why it's like negatively coded here, but I didn't make this report. It's the University of Chicago. 33% report being a smoker, but again, what does that mean? 66.67% were not smokers. So it, like, yeah. 26% report eating 5 or more servings of vegetables and fruits daily. Now, that part is written more positively than the others. The other ones were like kind of like you could have flipped those to be more positive. This one, I say positive in the sense that it's saying who is doing the positive act. So 26% are doing the positive act, but it's negative because it's only 26%. So also this is the fun thing with numbers. And Dr. Fenwick, I'm gonna have to find her article and I'll insert it here. An article name. I know the context. I don't know the name of the article, but I'm gonna insert it here. Great. Let's give her praise. Thank you. But she did a talk at a community gathering. So this is not a gathering of scholars, faculty, PhD students. It's a community gathering with parents, teachers, everybody at the gathering. And she talked about how numbers are so deceiving. Do not believe numbers at face value when people give you numbers and they give you those summary reports, because they tweak and pull specific numbers to fit an agenda. Okay. And so just like I kept saying, like, well, 26% report not participating. Well, why would you just say that 74% are participating? Like, why did it have to be negative? 36% are drinking the soda and the sweetened drinks every day. Well, why not report that 64% are not doing that? And this is a positive behavior, and we're happy that majority of the community is not doing that. The majority of the community is participating in exercise. The majority of the community is not smoking. Like, why not celebrate that majority are having these healthy habits despite systemic challenges? You catch what I'm throwing? Yeah. Okay. And then of course, so they wanted all the numbers to be low. That's what basically they wanted all the numbers to be low. 26, 36, 33, 26. It didn't have to be like that. So numbers are deceiving. Really look into them. Don't take them at face value. And that's what I'm literally doing that in real time with y'all. Like I'm dissecting these numbers with y'all in real time. This is my real processing. Okay. But so it says here 26% report eating 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables daily. Okay. And that gets back into what we already talked about with food apartheid. Because if it's not available, how am I eating it every day? If it's not available, how am I going to eat it? If it's not in my vicinity, if I have to go through Lints and hella different trains and all these different buses and stuff like that, to try to get to some fresh produce, that's not going to be something in my daily diet. Like, it's just not going to be there, you know? And so then when we look at how health outcomes more specifically, this really feels like a throwback to the fact that racism causes changes to the brain for real. Like, all these things are parts of the system of racism, absolutely. Like the ways that we have a food apartheid that leads to food insecurity, that leads to these other, issues that they talked about on this whole access to care type thing and the health behaviors and all that they was talking about. Okay. It all ties back to racism. So the top causes of death are heart disease, cancer, injury, diabetes related, and accidents. Obviously, injury, accidents, again, more context will be needed, but heart disease, cancer, diabetes related, these are very common comorbidities for the Black community. When COVID hit, it was like, oh, heart disease, cancer, like, these are huge comorbidities. And cancer specifically, let me not get ahead of myself. But I'm going to be getting into the cancer cluster, which brings me to the father of environmental injustice, and it takes me to Houston. So I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself. I'm starting with Inglewood because we just talked about them a little bit, and the issue with the Whole Foods. Because was Inglewood not the Whole Foods? Let me check. Let me fact check myself. Yes, Inglewood was the Whole Foods, absolutely. So anyway, that's why we're sticking with them for a second. And I'm gonna bring you back to Dr. Bullard. So anyway, cancer's on here, and stick that in your brain here. Keep it in the brain because I'm gonna be coming back to it. But also infant mortality. So 18 for Inglewood, 7 for Chicago. Life expectancy at birth, 72 years for Inglewood, 77 for Chicago as a whole. They mentioned the Loop. Very gentrified, very much so. Business district, 82 years, 10 more years on their life. Because why? Because racism causes changes to the brain that literally lead to premature death. That's why. It took 10 years off their life, literally. Okay. So they have high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, which again, we already talked about how if you have food insecurity, you don't have access to fresh, healthy food, you're more likely to end up being to being obese, to having diabetes. Asthma is not naturally occurring. Asthma is a result of environmental injustice. I will get into that in just a second. But asthma is not an inherited thing. It's not because your mama, your grandmother, your grandfather, it's not because they had asthma. It's because y'all are on an environment that is systematically making you sick and giving you asthma. Like the environment is literally giving you asthma. We also talk about community resources, which I want to end on a good note. So I'm gonna still read through these resources for those who are just listening in on this. 16 schools, 2 fitness facilities, 9 hospital and health services, 1 community garden. We need more of those. 73 faith-based organizations, 8 social service organizations, 16 grocery stores, 2 pharmacies, and 10 public parks. So that's Inglewood. I'm coming to Houston now. Hello, Houston. Welcome to Houston. Okay. So I first want to do a little bit kind of in the same way that we just looked at Inglewood. We looked at like the demographics of it, and especially comparing it to Chicago as a more of a the white parts of Chicago, basically what they was doing. And that's especially why they talk about the Loop in Chicago, because they were really trying to get into that gentrification. But again, they could have explained them more. They could have made it a little bit more explicit. But nevertheless, coming on over to Houston. So we have here this map of the gentrification typology there. Okay, and so we see these areas where they are gentrifying. They have some established areas, some gentrifying areas, some continual areas, and some not gentrifying areas. And I would note here that the not gentrifying areas, by and large, as someone who has been and lived and worked in Houston, they're not areas that need to be gentrified because they're already white people. Like, obviously, like it's like anyway. But all the areas where they are, establishing this gentrification are predominantly areas with Black and Latinx folks. I mean, Black and brown, but primarily Latinx folks. So, of the neighborhoods that are identified as experiencing gentrification, 4 are the historically Black communities. We have Fifth Ward and Third Ward. They're located inside of I-610 and Independence Heights and Sunnyside, which fall between I-610 and Beltway 8. Now, I can go down a rabbit hole as well about how highways mark redlining, they mark gentrification. These are ways that they have cut Black communities off from necessary resources like grocery stores and other places where they can have health and sustenance for themselves. So highways, as much as they, make your commute easier to work, I'm sure like highways have use, but there's so much history in the ways that technology and advancement and modernization has been used to systematically harm the Black community. Another quick example, if you think I'm just, talking my ish, even lanterns, baby. And I know we at the light bulb now. I know we got flashlights. I know, but if we go back to the lantern, you know why they brought that lantern on over here to the United States of America, these colonies over here, is because they required, especially in the North, because folks in the North were a bit more free than folks in the South, to hold lanterns if they were out after dark to be identified as Black. They did the same thing with clothes, had to wear certain types of fabric and colored fabric to identify yourself as Black as well. Just different ways where technology, modernization has been used to systematically oppress, subjugate Black people. Like so highways is one of those, again, this topic for another day. Can't get into it too much, but I kept that note in here just so we could touch on it a little bit. Now, like I said at the beginning, I did a lecture on a piece, and this is a piece from Camila Alvarez, which is called Structural Racism as an Environmental Justice Issue, a multi-level analysis of the State Racism Index and environmental health risk from air toxics. Okay. I'm going to get into her article, but I first want to discuss the father of environmental justice, which is Dr. Robert Bullard. Now, as I get into a little bit about him, I am going to be largely going through the slides that I taught in the class. So again, like I said, y'all get some free game. Okay, these classes not cheap, baby. These classes not cheap. Okay, so we have here a picture of Dr. Robert Bullard. All right, we have a picture of him there. And what he did was he pointed out that institutionalized racism stemmed from government and corporate policies that led to environmental racism. These practices included redlining, we already talked about it, redlining, zoning, colorblind adaptation planning. And again, that leads into things like the highway formation. So colorblind, like, oh, well, that's just normal pointing it. And they do the same thing with landfills, as he'll get into as well in the case that he fought. So the exportation of hazardous waste in large do affect poor countries in the global South as well. So I don't want to just keep this in an American context. Our neighbors matter as well. So the global South is really paying the price for our lax environmental policies and safety practices up here in the North. Okay. They make them into these like pollution havens. Folks who live in the fence line zones, as they're termed, they are extremely vulnerable areas. They're closest to toxic waste facilities. About 75% are more likely to be Black, and 60% are more likely to be Latino. Because again, considering the global South, it's by and large South America, Africa, Australia, things like that. Okay. People of color are more likely to live near places like hazardous waste sites, power plants, landfills, chemical plants, and other industrial complexes as well. Now, this is a picture of Fifth Ward, Houston in the 1970s. And again, it's something about the 70s that war on drugs. I want to do a whole podcast on the 70s, something about the 70s. This is a picture of Houston in the 1970s, around the time where Bean versus Southwestern Waste Management case created this study from Dr. Bullard. So his wife at the time was working this case. She's a lawyer against the Southwestern Waste Management Company. And Dr. Bullard, being the researcher he is, dug into that to figure out what in the world was going on. And what he found, the statement was from him and Beverly Wright, is that one of the most important indicators of one's health is one's street address. Okay. He found that, and this is again at the time of the 1970s in Houston, he found that 5 out of 5, that is 100%, that is 100 with the percent sign, that is all of them, 5 out of 5 city owned landfills. So the city is doing it. They know they're doing it. City owned landfills, and 3 out of 4, 75%, 75% privately owned landfills. So they also culpable, were in predominantly Black neighborhoods in Houston. He also found that 6 out of 8 city incinerators were in Black neighborhoods as well. In 1979, he found that 25% of Houston was Black, so a quarter, just a quarter. And yet 82% of garbage in the city was dumped on 25% of the city. 82% of the garbage was dumped on 25% of the city. 82% of the garbage in the city was dumped on the 25% of Houston that was Black. And he noted that this discrimination is a continuation of racial redlining, which blocked those neighborhoods from infrastructure such as sewages and water systems to begin with. So they don't have sewer systems. They don't have proper sewer and water systems at that. Okay. And the city is dumping garbage, is putting waste, incinerators, because landfills have waste as well, right? Landfills, incinerators, and dumping garbage on these places where they already know they have not put the infrastructure for sewage and water systems. That's intentional. That's not no happenstance. That's not no accident. Okay. The judge on the case was an old white man, and he had the habit of calling the Black plaintiffs in the case negresses. And he unsurprisingly ruled in favor of the Southwestern Waste Management Corporation, despite the wealth of information and research that Dr. Bullard did. The publishers were no better. Okay, they also were coming in and discrediting and things. Literally, he was able to build a case where you could see that from Houston to Dallas to the Louisiana Cancer Alley to the Alabama Black Belt to West Virginia, that there is clear discrimination that is causing the problems there. So these health problems, these environmental problems are all very much so systematically done via discrimination and racism specifically. Nevertheless, these publishers were asserting that there's no such thing as environmental injustice and everybody is treated the same. The environment is neutral. The environment is neutral. That's also, just circling back to the episode real quick, that's also why the term food desert was so insidious, because you're again insinuating that the desert is a natural thing and nature or the environment can be considered to be neutral. So nobody did it to you. You just, you just decided to be in an area where y'all ain't got no grocery stores. I don't know what to say. You just decided to be in an area where we want to dump all of our garbage. I don't know what to say. Takes the blame off the people who are doing the nasty work. Now, at this point, the cancer cluster is only getting worse. So I taught in Fifth Ward, Houston, and reading about his work post, like teaching there in COVID, really resonated because my friend and sister teacher there hit me to what they call the Fifth Ward Cancer Cluster, which led to deaths of so many folks, illnesses of so many folks in that community that I personally know as well. And I'm not gonna get into like more personal things about it, but it also just really hit home for me and for others. Like the cancer cluster really hit home, okay, last year specifically. But I was also reminded, getting into more my own personal business, of the Black neighborhood that I grew up in and the different times where my Granny had to raise hell, as she likes to say, to get the city to do routine work and upkeep within our neighborhood, which was it's a historically Black neighborhood. And they would often like change our schedules. They don't do that to the white neighborhoods. They would change our schedules for trash pickup. They would come in and just really do what they want to do, like turn off water for da da da. They doing somewhere else. Like it's a project that's happening somewhere else, but they come in and turn off our stuff, tweak our stuff, so they can then support and modernize and do all this other stuff. These white areas, disgusting. And also the fact that we're surrounded by a railroad. So the railways there is pulling, lots of different things, but it's not it's not a train that's pulling people. So I'd say that, like, different construction materials. So there's a lot of dust that can swarm up in the area. And we even have an industrial site that was like literally right behind our house. And I remember playing outside plenty of times, and like dust clouds would just rise up over the wired fence that separated us, like our house and our neighborhood, from this industrial yard. And so as I think about expanding this idea of clean energy to include opportunities for people of color, like, we're not really in those spaces, and it's not because we don't have that passion. Environmental injustice affects us literally the most. That's what I've shown through this presentation. Like, it, environmental racism literally affects us the most. We have a stake in it, but we are also closed out of those spaces. Like, even using terms like food desert, homegirl Karen Washington wasn't with that. She a farmer and an activist, but she's not with that term. Like, you're also doing things that purposely exclude us, because it's honestly hurtful to us as a community. Okay. And as we consider like what it means to exist within these spaces, I think it also is important to note the difference between social justice environmental movement and the environmental racism movement. Because when we think about social justice environmental movement, it's usually like save the whale, save the ocean, help the dogs in the shelter, save the parks. But when we're talking about environmental racism, which was specifically coined by Benjamin Chavez, because environmental injustice, that's Dr. Bullard, this term environmental racism is actually Benjamin Chavez, which was from 1982. So again, them 70s and them 80s on the next, okay, because they were doing very devious things at that time period. But the environmental racism movement, on the contrary, is about saving Black and not even saving, about giving space for us to come together as a collective to gather enough resources to transform our realities. Okay? Because white people trying to come in and save never works. But we need the space and the resources to do what we need to do to help our communities. Okay. And it also examines, so again, the environmental racism movement more so examines the overuse of resources by the rich via capitalism. So it directly also has a critique of capitalism that's just not really there in the typical, like, I recycle movement. And circling back to the piece from Dr. Alvarez, we see the ways that these air toxics that are part of structural racism as an environmental justice issue cause cancer. Now, cancer was also mentioned on the list for Inglewood. I said I was going to be coming back to cancer. I mentioned it briefly with Fifth Ward Cancer Cluster, as well as other areas along the South that are known to have a lot of carcinogenic elements to the environments, especially around Black and brown people. Now, in this study from Dr. Alvarez, she did a cross-sectional multi-level analysis on data from 65,000 census tracts. So she did a lot of data digging, okay? But I appreciate that she mentioned in this study that they may have been conservative, like these numbers may have been conservative due to political pressures from the industry. So they lying. That's what she nice to saying they lying. So these numbers are not even as bad as they really are. Like, they're not gonna be yeah, yeah. I said it right the first time. Yeah. These numbers are worse than what they appear, basically. These numbers are actually worse. So even some of these yellow areas probably should be red. Some of these lime green areas, I'm putting the map here. Some of these lime green areas might need to be yellow. Some of these dark green areas might need to be lime. Yeah, so it's not accurate. And we see I mean, come on, Dr. Bullard. He's still right because we see red all over the Houston area, that southern area of Louisiana, Alabama, on up toward West Virginia as well. He mentioned all these places. So, I mean, hitting on the head, hitting on the head. He literally said this, and this was back in 1970, 1979 exact was a lot of his study. And same results now, probably worse than when he, if he had had access to that much census data. I'm sure it is just astronomically increased since he did that. And so her results found that higher state level black white gaps have a higher level of estimated cancer risk and non-cancer respiratory system risk from outdoor air toxics for all racial and ethnic groups. So that means that if I'm in a state that has a high level of a black white gap, I could be any other race, and I'm still going to be within a state that has a higher level of estimated cancer risk because, again, those states with that high black white gap are typically states that have been heavily redlined and zoned due to what? Structural and systemic racism and anti-blackness. Absolutely, absolutely. It all circles back to racism. So if I lean back in on that food insecurity, food apartheid episode as well, the other thing I was biting my tongue on is the ways that one could say, well, then just, you don't have access to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, why not grow them? So I mentioned how the air is toxic, yes, and plants can in some ways help with that because they push out O2 and take in CO2. So okay, you got a little argument there, but the soil as well. So if we go back into what Bullard was talking about, Dr. Bullard was talking about with the waste and the like toxic waste is being dumped and poured into these communities without proper sewage and water systems, and the fact that he saw that across states that are also highlighted in this new study, because Dr. Alvarez is doing this study recently, right? She just did this study. So these same areas that he noted in 1979 are having extreme problems now, again, of the same variety. So she was focusing on air toxics, but they also had that same dumping and lack of systems to move the dumped waste and things out of these communities. The soil is toxic. You can't even plant nothing for real. Not if you want some good, hearty, good fruits and vegetables. Because yeah, they might grow. You might say, well, what are they gonna grow? But the nutrient value of them is diminished, and more than likely, again, they probably still are carrying those carcinogenic toxins within them. So you might think, okay, I don't have a grocery store near me, I don't have fresh fruit and vegetables near me, I don't want to succumb to the food desert, I'm above that, I can grow my own shit, like da da da. And you growing stuff and you still getting sick because your soil is toxic, and so you're still putting those toxins into your body. So it's just, and that's kind of where we end up kind of getting against the wall with that whole bootstrap mentality, where people try to come in and say, well, bootstrap it, because this problem with food apartheid is so insidious that it is very difficult to bootstrap, because they have literally poisoned our soils, they have poisoned our waterways, they have poisoned our air. Gotta breathe air. Like it's so hard to escape cancer at this point and other risk factors just from the environmental aspects alone. But then when you add in the fact that experiences with racism, so the ways that we are microaggressed and how microaggressions really are macro in so many ways, because that shit, especially in today's world with Trump and his puppeteer Ellen Musty, that shit is intentional at this point. It's not even micro. You knew what you said. You knew, like, you meant to say it like that. You meant to insult me. You meant to upset me. You meant to incite anger in me because you're angry at yourself. You're displeased with yourself, and now you're trying to force those things back onto me. It's so difficult to escape all this. But I don't have a positive note for this one. The last one ended with food sovereignty. That's positive. Um, Black farmers, black farmers, black farmers, black farmers. So support black farmers as much as you can. I don't know if you do have in your area local black farmers, or you're able to get to them to support them and their work they're doing, volunteering with them, however you can support them, please do. Also, like cleanups for the community. Like if you can engage with cleanups, that's another positive thing that we can do in our communities. And having some compassion. I mean, if you have extra canned goods or extra funds to provide canned goods and other pantry items to schools, to community centers, please do that. If you can support a local grocery store in your city, I know a few of them. There's one of them in Atlanta specifically. I know, I think it's called the grocery spot. But for different places where they have pretty much like a free grocery store, you can give donations. They take donations. They need donations. So again, so for folks who are able and willing, give donations to those types of places where families can come in and get the groceries, the fresh produce that they need, and not have to deal with these, all these extra theft prevention things, the extra policing and the extra surveillance, all the extra hoopla of anti-black racism, basically. But they're still able to get the goods that they need for their family, for themselves and for their family. And that makes it a little more positive. Yes, like go help your neighbor. Let's start this collective work together. Thanks, and until next time. Also, last thing, also, I will try to do some more of my lecture talks as well. So be prepared to have some more lectures, but also as things happen in the world or in my life and they seem pertinent, I'll also throw those in here too. But definitely going to be going through some of those just because it's nice context and I like sharing research with the world. So thank you. Until next time. Peace.